Well, now it's an unprecedented move by former President Barack Obama.
Yes, he publicly criticized President Trump during a speech to encourage young people to vote this November. And CBS 2's Laurie Perez is here with his words and how President Trump fired back, Laurie.
That's right, Jeff and Pat. As you might imagine, there is an unwritten rule among former presidents to not talk about the current president, at least not in public. Today, former President Obama said he had to break that rule because so much is at stake.
Sometimes the backlash comes from people who are genuinely, if wrongly, fearful of change.
In front of a packed crowd at the University of Illinois, former President Obama broke protocol of sorts and attacked the man who succeeded him in the White House.
More often it's manufactured by the powerful and the privileged who want to keep us divided and keep us angry and keep us cynical because that helps them maintain the status quo and keep their power. It did not start with Donald Trump. He is a symptom, not the cause.
From Russia,
they're undermining our alliances, cozying up to Russia. What happened to the Republican Party?
To the scathing New York Times op-ed blasting the Trump administration.
The claim that everything will turn out okay because there are people inside the White House who secretly aren't following the president's orders. That is not a check. I'm being serious here. That's not how our democracy is supposed to work.
Mr. Obama didn't hold back. Neither did Mr. Trump.
What do you think of President Obama's speech? And I said, I'm sorry, I watched it, but I fell asleep.
During a speech in Fargo, North Dakota, the president gave this message to his predecessor.
If the Democrats got in with their agenda in November of almost 2 years ago, instead of having 4.2 up, I believe honestly you'd have 4.2 down. You'd be negative.
Regarding that op-ed, the president now wants the Justice Department to find out who wrote it as a matter of national security. Right now, Jeff Sessions' team hasn't commented, but UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has. In her own op-ed publishing in today's Washington Post, she put it bluntly. To Mr. or Ms. Anonymous, I say, step up and help the administration do great things for the country. If you disagree with some policies, make your case directly to the president. But do not stay in your position and secretly undermine the president and the rest of our team. It is cowardly, it is anti-democratic, and it is a disservice to our country. Executives at the New York Times had this to say about a possible investigation. The president's threats both underscore why we must safeguard the identity of the writer of this op-ed and serve as a reminder of the importance of a free and independent press to American democracy. And this just in, a source close to the White House tells CNN aides have narrowed down their search of who the op-ed writer is to a few names. The source also revealed the president is obsessed with knowing that person's identity, despite Chief of Staff John Kelly urging him to let it pass. Pat, back to you.